Latest Iran ceasefire update, May 30th, 2026. The ceasefire between the United States and Iran remains technically in effect, but it is still extremely fragile and far from a permanent peace agreement. Negotiations continue behind the scenes through international mediators, and reports indicate that both sides are discussing a possible 60-day extension of the current truce to allow more time for broader peace talks. However, major disagreements remain over Iran's nuclear program, sanctions relief, frozen Iranian assets, and the future of the Strait of Hormuz. Recent U.S. military strikes and Iranian accusations of ceasefire violations have further complicated the situation, increasing mistrust on both sides. While diplomats describe progress as possible, neither Washington nor Tehran has announced a final breakthrough. For now, the fighting has largely paused, but the risk of renewed escalation remains significant. Welcome to African Stories by Frank Asada. Where are you watching from? Before we dive into the recent United States and Iran ceasefire update, we encourage you to rate the video and tell us in the comments below where you are watching from. Like, share, and subscribe so that you will be the first to be notified of our next video coming up. What happened this week? Early week, Iran and U.S. negotiators continued indirect talks through mediators in Qatar and Pakistan, focusing on maintaining the ceasefire and preventing renewed military escalation. Mid-week, reports emerged that both sides were discussing a possible extension of the ceasefire, though details regarding duration, conditions, and enforcement remain unresolved. Late week, the U.S. officials acknowledged modest progress in negotiations, but cautioned that significant disagreements still separate the two sides on core issues. 1. Iran and U.S. continue indirect negotiations. Throughout the week, diplomatic contacts between Iran and the United States continued through trusted intermediaries, particularly Qatar and Pakistan. Because direct communication between Washington and Tehran remains politically sensitive, mediators have been carrying proposals, counterproposals, and messages between the two governments. The primary objective has been to preserve the fragile ceasefire that halted large-scale military operations earlier this year. Diplomatic sources indicate that both sides recognize the risks of renewed conflict and the potentially devastating consequences for regional stability, global energy markets, and international security. Although neither government has publicly announced a major breakthrough, the continuation of talks itself is viewed by many analysts as a positive sign. The fact that negotiations remain active suggests that both sides still believe a diplomatic solution is preferable to a return to open confrontation. 2. Discussion of a possible ceasefire extension. As negotiations progressed, reports surfaced indicating that Iranian and American representatives have been exploring the possibility of extending the current ceasefire arrangement. The existing truce has significantly reduced direct military confrontations, but officials on both sides reportedly believe additional time may be necessary to negotiate a broader agreement. Discussions have centered on the potential length of an extension, mechanisms for monitoring compliance, and guarantees that neither side will exploit the pause to gain military advantages. However, important questions remain unanswered. Final approval would likely require endorsement from senior political and military leaders in both countries, and implementation details have yet to be finalized. For now, the extension remains only a proposal under discussion, but its consideration reflects a shared interest in preventing a rapid collapse of the ceasefire framework. 3. Progress reported, but major disputes remain. Toward the end of the week, U.S. officials publicly stated that some progress had been achieved in the ongoing negotiations. According to these officials, discussions have become more substantive and several technical issues have moved closer to resolution. Nevertheless, they emphasize that major disagreements continue to block a comprehensive peace agreement. Among the most difficult issues are the future of Iran's nuclear activities, the removal of economic sanctions, the release of frozen Iranian assets, regional security guarantees, and freedom of navigation through the Strait of Hormuz. Iranian officials have also signaled that these issues must be addressed before any permanent settlement can be reached. As a result, diplomats describe the current situation as encouraging but incomplete. The ceasefire remains intact, yet the path toward a lasting peace agreement continues to face significant obstacles. While enjoying the analyses, we encourage you to share and subscribe to this channel. This will absolutely help our channel grow, and you will never miss any of our new videos coming up. Major problem. alleged ceasefire violations. Several days ago, the U.S. forces reportedly conducted strikes against Iranian missile-related facilities and vessels suspected of supporting mine-laying operations near the Strait of Hormuz. Shortly after, Iranian officials condemned the attacks as clear violations of the ceasefire agreement and warned that Tehran reserves the right to respond. Most recently, despite rising tensions and harsh rhetoric, Iran remained engaged in negotiations, indicating that diplomatic channels are still considered valuable by both sides. 1. The U.S. strikes raise new concerns. One of the biggest challenges facing the ceasefire this week has been a series of reported U.S. military strikes targeting Iranian missile-related assets and vessels allegedly involved in mine-laying activities near the Strait of Hormuz. American officials reportedly viewed these actions as necessary for protecting international shipping lanes and regional security. However, the operations immediately raised concerns about whether military activity was undermining the fragile truce. 2. Iran accuses the U.S. of violating the ceasefire. Iran reacted strongly to the reported strikes, accusing the United States of breaching the terms and spirit of the ceasefire. Iranian officials argued that military attacks during ongoing negotiations damage trust and make diplomacy more difficult. Tehran issued warnings that it reserves the right to defend itself and respond if further actions occur. These statements increase fears that the ceasefire could unravel if tensions continue to escalate. 3. Diplomacy survives despite rising tensions. Despite the accusations and growing mistrust, Iran did not abandon the negotiation process. Diplomatic contacts reportedly continued through mediators, suggesting that leaders on both sides still see potential benefits in pursuing a negotiated settlement. Analysts note that this may be the most encouraging sign of the week. Although military incidents have complicated discussions, neither Washington nor Tehran appears eager to return to full-scale confrontation, keeping hopes alive for further diplomatic progress. Key issues still blocking a full peace deal. 1. Iran's nuclear program. The future of Iran's nuclear program remains the most difficult obstacle in the negotiations. The United States continues to demand strict limits on Iran's nuclear activities, including restrictions on uranium enrichment and the disposal or transfer of highly enriched uranium stockpiles. Washington argues that these measures are necessary to prevent the development of nuclear weapons. Iran, however, insists that it has the right to maintain a peaceful civilian nuclear program under international law. Iranian leaders are seeking recognition of those rights, along with security guarantees that future U.S. or Israeli military actions will not target Iranian nuclear facilities. The gap between these positions remains substantial and unresolved. 2. Frozen Iranian assets. Another major point of disagreement involves billions of dollars in Iranian funds currently frozen in foreign banks due to sanctions and previous disputes. Tehran views access to these assets as essential for economic recovery following years of sanctions, instability, and conflict-related damage. Negotiators have reportedly discussed various mechanisms for releasing the funds in stages. Under some proposals, portions of the assets would be released as Iran fulfills specific commitments under any future agreement. However, disagreements remain over the timing, amount, oversight, and conditions attached to the release of these funds. 3. Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz continues to be a central issue because of its critical role in the global energy market. A significant percentage of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas shipments pass through this narrow waterway, making stability in the region a priority for both regional and international powers. Negotiators are seeking ways to guarantee safe navigation, reduce military tensions, and prevent future disruptions to commercial shipping. Any lasting agreement will likely require clear security arrangements and confidence-building measures to ensure that shipping lanes remain open and protected from future military incidents. 4. Regional conflicts. Iran has repeatedly argued that a lasting peace agreement cannot focus solely on U.S.-Iran relations. Tehran wants broader regional security concerns included in the negotiations, particularly issues involving Israel, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and other areas where competing interests continue to fuel instability. Iranian officials have specifically pointed to Israeli military operations in Lebanon and ongoing regional confrontations as matters that should be addressed within a comprehensive settlement. The United States and its allies have generally preferred a narrower focus, creating another challenge for negotiators attempting to reach a durable and wide-ranging peace agreement. Conditions inside Iran. Severe economic stress. Although the ceasefire has reduced large-scale military operations, Iran continues to face significant economic challenges. Years of sanctions, combined with the recent conflict, have placed enormous pressure on government finances, businesses, and households. Many industries are struggling to recover, while uncertainty about future negotiations continues to discourage investment and economic growth. Inflation and shortages. Ordinary Iranians continue to feel the effects of high inflation and periodic shortages of essential goods. Rising prices have reduced purchasing power for many families, making daily necessities increasingly difficult to afford. While the ceasefire has eased some immediate disruptions, economic instability remains a major concern for citizens across both urban and rural areas. Damage from the conflict. The conflict left behind physical and economic damage that will take time and resources to repair. Infrastructure, transportation networks, industrial facilities, and other strategic assets were affected to varying degrees during the fighting. Recovery efforts have begun in some areas, but rebuilding damaged facilities remains a costly and long-term challenge. Political tensions and security crackdowns. The internal political environment also remains tense. Iranian authorities continue to emphasize national security and stability while maintaining strict control over potential sources of unrest. Reports suggest that security measures have increased in some areas as officials seek to prevent demonstrations, political challenges, or activities they believe could threaten public order. Public view of the ceasefire. Many civilians reportedly see the ceasefire not as a permanent solution, but as a temporary pause in a larger crisis. While there's relief that major fighting has subsided, uncertainty about future negotiations, economic hardships, and regional tensions has left many people cautious. For many Iranians, true peace would depend on whether lasting political and economic solutions can be achieved. Bottom line, as of May 30th, 2026, the ceasefire between the United States and Iran remains in effect, preventing a return to the large-scale military operations that brought the region to the brink of a wider war earlier this year. Diplomatic channels remain open, and negotiators continue to work through mediators in an effort to transform the fragile truce into a more durable agreement. Reports suggesting that both sides are discussing a possible extension of the ceasefire indicate that neither Washington nor Tehran appears eager to resume direct confrontation at this time. However, significant obstacles remain. No comprehensive peace agreement has been finalized, and negotiators continue to struggle with major disputes involving Iran's nuclear program, sanctions relief, frozen assets, regional security concerns, and the future of the Strait of Hormuz. At the same time, military incidents and accusations of ceasefire violations continue to generate mistrust, creating additional pressure on the diplomatic process. The current situation is perhaps best described as ceasefire holding peace not yet secured. While the guns have largely fallen silent, the underlying disagreements that fuel the conflict remain unresolved. Any major military incident, particularly involving the Strait of Hormuz, Israeli operations in Lebanon, attacks on Iranian missile facilities, or actions by regional proxy groups, could quickly derail negotiations and trigger a new cycle of escalation. For now, diplomacy remains alive, but the path toward lasting peace remains uncertain. The coming weeks may determine whether the ceasefire evolves into a broader settlement or becomes merely a temporary pause before another period of regional instability and confrontation. In closing, as this crisis continues to unfold, perhaps the greatest lesson is that wars are often easier to start than to end. Military victories may change battlefields, but lasting peace requires trust, patience, compromise, and the courage to choose dialogue over destruction. The current ceasefire offers a rare opportunity to step back from the edge and pursue a different path. History repeatedly shows that lasting stability is built not through fear alone, but through understanding, restraint, and shared commitment to preventing future generations from inheriting today's conflicts. Thank you for watching. Please leave comments. We will really love to hear from you. What is your takeaway? We take all comments very seriously. Like, share, and subscribe so that you'll be the first to be notified of our next video. Coming up,